Sometimes betrayal cuts so deep it rewrites the rules of mercy. David Harrison thought leaving his devoted wife of 23 years for a vibrant 28-year-old would finally give him the excitement he craved. But when a massive stroke left him helpless and broken, fate delivered the cruelest twist imaginable. The woman hired to care for him was the same wife he had abandoned. This is the story of how karma, compassion, and revenge intertwined in ways that would challenge everything we believe about forgiveness, justice, and the price of betrayal. Chapter 1. The Midlife Betrayal. David Harrison had always believed that success would shield him from the ordinary disappointments that plagued other men. At 48, he possessed the markers of achievement that society celebrated: a prestigious position as senior financial advisor at Peterson Associates, a colonial home in an upscale neighborhood, and a reputation for turning modest investments into substantial portfolios. Yet beneath this carefully constructed exterior, a restless dissatisfaction had been growing like a tumor, slowly consuming his appreciation for everything he had built. His marriage to Sarah had become predictable in ways that felt suffocating rather than comforting. 23 years of shared routines had created a partnership that functioned with mechanical efficiency but little passion. Sarah, now 45, worked as a registered nurse at the local hospital, her days consumed by caring for others with the same gentle competence she brought to managing their household. Their conversations revolved around mortgage payments, their teenagers' college plans, and scheduling conflicts that required careful coordination. The spark that had once defined their relationship had been gradually extinguished by the demands of raising children, building careers, and maintaining the suburban lifestyle they had worked so hard to achieve. David found himself watching Sarah move through their shared spaces with growing detachment, seeing her not as the woman he had fallen in love with, but as a roommate whose presence had become part of the furniture. Amber Rodriguez entered his life during a client meeting in March, a 28-year-old marketing consultant whose energy filled conference rooms like electricity. Her laughter came easily, her ideas sparkled with creativity, and her attention to David felt like sunlight after years of living in shadows. She possessed the kind of vibrant confidence that made middle-aged men remember what it felt like to feel truly alive. The affair began with extended business lunches that stretched into private dinners, followed by weekend conferences that provided convenient cover for hotel rendezvous. David told himself he deserved this happiness, that his years of responsibility and sacrifice had earned him the right to pursue a genuine connection. When Amber whispered that she had never met a man who understood her ambitions the way he did, David began planning an exit strategy that would free him from the obligations that suddenly felt like prison walls. Chapter 2. Building a New Foundation. The divorce papers were filed on a cold February morning, delivered to Sarah while she was preparing breakfast for their 16-year-old twins. David had moved out 3 weeks earlier, claiming he needed space to think, but Sarah discovered the truth when she found hotel receipts and jewelry purchases on their joint credit card statement. The financial advisor who had built his career on protecting other people's assets showed no such consideration for the family he was abandoning. The settlement negotiations revealed the calculated nature of David's betrayal. He had systematically moved assets into accounts Sarah couldn't access, claiming business investments required liquid capital. Their joint savings, accumulated over 2 decades of careful budgeting and shared sacrifice, had been quietly redirected to fund his new lifestyle. Sarah retained the house and primary custody, but the mortgage payments now fell entirely on her nursing salary, creating an impossible financial burden. David's new apartment overlooked the harbor, a sleek 2-bedroom unit that cost more per month than Sarah's previous grocery budget. He furnished it with modern pieces that Amber selected, each purchase designed to erase any trace of his previous domestic life. Their social media presence showcased restaurant meals that exceeded Sarah's weekly earnings, weekend trips to luxury resorts, and shopping expeditions that featured designer bags and expensive jewelry. Meanwhile, Sarah picked up additional shifts at the hospital, working nights and weekends to maintain the stability her children needed. The exhaustion showed in her face during rare moments when she allowed herself to rest. Their son Marcus channeled his anger into athletics, spending hours at the gym punishing himself for his father's choices. Their daughter Emma withdrew into academic achievement, earning perfect grades as if excellence might somehow repair their fractured family. David justified these sacrifices as temporary inconveniences that would resolve once everyone adjusted to the new arrangements. He sent child support payments that covered the legal minimum while spending thousands on Amber's entertainment. When his children refused his weekend visitation invitations, he told himself they would eventually understand that he had chosen happiness over obligation. The expensive dinners and luxury vacations felt like validation of his decision to prioritize his own fulfillment over societal expectations of loyalty and sacrifice. Chapter 3. When Youth Meets Reality. The cracks in David's new paradise began appearing during their 6-month anniversary dinner at the city's most expensive restaurant. Amber scrolled through her phone between courses, pausing only to photograph her meal for social media, while David attempted to engage her in conversation about their future together. Her responses came in distracted half-sentences, her attention clearly divided between his words and whatever drama was unfolding on her Instagram feed. The woman who had once hung on his every word now treated their conversations as background noise to her digital life. Her excitement about his business success had transformed into a casual expectation that he would continue funding her increasingly expensive tastes. The designer handbags became monthly necessities rather than special gifts. The weekend getaways required first-class accommodations and 5-star restaurants, with Amber expressing genuine disappointment when David suggested more modest alternatives. Their apartment conversations revealed the shallow foundation of their connection. Amber's interests centered on fashion trends, celebrity gossip, and social media metrics, topics that left David feeling intellectually starved. When he tried to discuss market analysis or investment strategies that had once fascinated Sarah, Amber's eyes glazed over with obvious boredom. She had no curiosity about his work beyond its capacity to generate income for her lifestyle maintenance. The financial pressure began affecting David's professional performance. Client meetings suffered as he worried about Amber's latest shopping expedition or vacation demand. His portfolio management became less careful as he prioritized quick gains over long-term stability, hoping to generate the cash flow needed to satisfy her endless requirements. Colleagues noticed his distraction, and several clients expressed concerns about his recent recommendations. Most troubling was Amber's reaction to any mention of his children or former life. She dismissed his parental concerns with eye rolls and subject changes, treating his emotional complexity as an inconvenience that interfered with their fun. When David expressed guilt about missing Marcus's football games or Emma's academic awards, Amber accused him of living in the past instead of embracing their exciting present. The realization that hit David most painfully was how little Amber actually knew or cared about him as a person. She had never asked about his childhood, his dreams beyond financial success, or his fears about aging and mortality. Their relationship existed entirely in the present moment, sustained by expensive experiences rather than emotional intimacy. Yet David continued investing in their illusion of happiness, driven by pride and the terrifying prospect of admitting his catastrophic mistake to a world that had watched him destroy his family for this shallow substitute for love. Chapter 4. The Fall from Grace. The morning of September 15th began like countless others, with David reviewing client portfolios while Amber slept until noon in their expensive apartment. He had scheduled back-to-back meetings with 3 major investors, presentations that could determine whether his struggling practice would survive the financial strain of maintaining 2 households. The pressure had been building for months, manifesting in headaches, sleepless nights, and a persistent tremor in his left hand that he attributed to stress. The Peterson and Associates conference room was filled with potential clients when David felt the first wave of dizziness during his opening remarks. He gripped the presentation podium, attributing the sensation to insufficient coffee and too much anxiety. But as he attempted to continue discussing portfolio diversification strategies, His words began slurring together in ways that made the assembled investors exchange concerned glances. The stroke hit with devastating swiftness. David's left arm went completely numb, his vision blurred to the point where he could no longer read his carefully prepared notes, and the left side of his face drooped in the unmistakable pattern that his colleague Janet immediately recognized from her medical training. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but the damage was already irreversible. 3 weeks in intensive care revealed the full extent of the catastrophe. The stroke had affected David's motor cortex, leaving him with permanent paralysis on his left side, significant speech difficulties, and cognitive processing issues that made complex financial analysis nearly impossible. At 51 years old, his career as a financial advisor was effectively over, though his medical bills were just beginning. Amber's response to his condition proved more devastating than the stroke itself. Her initial hospital visits lasted only minutes, filled with obvious discomfort as she stared at his wheelchair and struggled to understand his slurred speech. She claimed that seeing him in such a vulnerable state was too emotionally overwhelming. But David recognized the truth in her increasingly rare appearances. She had never signed up to be a caregiver for a disabled middle-aged man. The conversation that ended their relationship took place on a Tuesday afternoon while David was still learning to navigate his wheelchair through their apartment. Amber announced that she had accepted a marketing position in another city, a career opportunity that required immediate relocation. Her explanation was filled with corporate buzzwords about professional growth and personal development, but notably absent was any mention of their shared future or her willingness to adapt their plans to his new limitations. Within a week, Amber had emptied the apartment of her belongings and blocked David's phone number. The woman who had once proclaimed her deep love and appreciation for his generous spirit disappeared as completely as if their 18-month relationship had never existed, leaving behind only credit card bills and broken promises that highlighted the transactional nature of her affection. Chapter 5. An Unexpected Reunion. The classified advertisement seeking private nursing care appeared in Sarah's employee newsletter on a gray November morning. The position offered competitive wages for overnight shifts, caring for a stroke patient who required assistance with daily activities but maintained most cognitive functions. After months of working double shifts to cover her mortgage payments and the twins' college fund, the additional income represented the difference between financial survival and genuine stability. Sarah had built her nursing career on professionalism and compassionate care, treating every patient with the same dedication regardless of their personal circumstances. 23 years of marriage to David had ended 18 months earlier, but her professional identity remained untouched by their personal history. She submitted her credentials and references, underwent the standard background check, and scheduled her first shift without knowing anything beyond the patient's age, medical condition, and insurance coverage. The address led her to a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of town, a significant downgrade from the Harborview luxury unit David had shared with Amber. Sarah climbed 3 flights of stairs, carrying her nursing bag and wondering about the patient who awaited her care. The agency had mentioned that previous caregivers had quit after short periods, citing difficulty with the patient's attitude and demanding behavior. When she approached apartment 3B and heard a familiar voice responding to her knock, Sarah's breath caught in recognition. The voice was different, slurred and slower than she remembered, but unmistakably David's. She pushed open the door and stepped into a living room that bore no resemblance to the carefully decorated spaces they had once shared, finding herself face-to-face with a man who had destroyed their family. David sat in his wheelchair near the window, wearing pajamas at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, his left arm hanging uselessly at his side. The confident businessman who had once commanded boardrooms now struggled to maintain eye contact with the woman he had abandoned for a younger model. His hair had gone completely gray during their separation, and the weight loss from his medical crisis made him appear decades older than his actual age. The silence stretched between them for several minutes, both processing the cruel irony of their situation. Sarah had imagined many scenarios for encountering David again. Chance meetings at their children's events, legal proceedings about support modifications, even social gatherings where they might be forced to interact politely. Never had she envisioned herself as his primary caregiver, responsible for his most intimate daily needs. David's humiliation was complete and obvious. The man who had once lectured her about personal growth and following dreams now required assistance with basic tasks that toddlers could manage independently. His apartment reflected his financial ruin. Generic furniture, an empty refrigerator, stacks of medical bills on every surface, and prescription bottles that revealed the extent of his ongoing health struggles. Sarah set down her nursing bag with the same calm professionalism she brought to every patient assignment. The power dynamic that had defined their marriage for over 2 decades had completely reversed, leaving David entirely dependent on the mercy of the woman whose life he had systematically dismantled in pursuit of selfish desires. Chapter 6: The Weight of Justice. The first weeks of caring for David tested every principle Sarah had developed during her nursing career. Professional ethics demanded that she treat all patients with equal compassion, regardless of their personal history or character flaws. Yet as she helped David with his medication schedule, assisted him with basic hygiene, and monitored his vital signs, she found herself confronting emotions that transcended medical training. David's daily routine revealed the complete devastation of his former life. His morning pills included medications for depression and anxiety, alongside the stroke recovery treatments, while his financial records showed a man who had lost everything he had once valued. The expensive suits hung and used in his closet, replaced by comfortable clothing that accommodated his physical limitations. His phone rarely rang, and when it did, the calls came from bill collectors or medical offices rather than friends or former colleagues. The psychological impact of their role reversal became apparent during David's attempts at conversation. He struggled to express gratitude for her professional care, while simultaneously grappling with the humiliation of requiring intimate assistance from the woman he had betrayed. His speech therapy exercises often ended in frustrated tears, not just from the physical difficulty of forming words, but from the crushing awareness that Sarah witnessed his every moment of weakness and vulnerability. Sarah found herself studying David's face during their interactions, searching for traces of the man she had once loved beneath the physical changes wrought by his stroke. The arrogance and restless dissatisfaction that had driven him to abandon their family had been replaced by something that resembled wisdom born from suffering. His questions about Marcus's football season and Emma's college applications revealed a desperate hunger for connection with the children who barely acknowledged his existence. The moral complexity of their situation deepened when David attempted to apologize during a particularly difficult evening. His words came slowly and with obvious effort, but his remorse appeared genuine as he acknowledged the pain he had caused their family. Sarah listened without responding, unsure whether his contrition stemmed from actual growth or simply the desperate circumstances that had left him completely dependent on her mercy. Their children's reactions to Sarah's new position created additional emotional turbulence. Marcus expressed fury that his mother was enabling their father by providing care he didn't deserve. Emma worried that Sarah was sacrificing her own healing process to help the man who had traumatized their entire family. Both teenagers struggled to understand why their mother would choose compassion over justified anger. As winter deepened, Sarah realized that her decision to continue caring for David had become about more than professional duty or financial necessity. In caring for the broken man who had once broken her heart, she was demonstrating that mercy could coexist with consequences, that forgiveness didn't require forgetting, and that sometimes the most profound justice comes through choosing humanity over vengeance. David Harrison died peacefully in his sleep on a cold February morning, exactly 2 years after he had filed for divorce. Sarah was present during his final moments, holding the hand of the man who had caused her such pain, proving that love, even wounded love, could transcend betrayal when guided by strength rather than weakness. The story ended not with dramatic revenge, but with the quiet triumph of a woman who chose to define herself by her capacity for grace rather than her appetite for retribution. What do you think about Sarah's choice? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime stories and the complex psychology of human relationships. Until next time, remember that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose compassion over revenge.